Good evening. My name is Dan Combest. And first I'd like to start with a couple questions for you. How many of you have actually been snorkeling before? Great. How about scuba diving? Even better. Well, diving is one of my favorite things to do in the world. The last 15 years I've been an avid diver and going to various spots. My favorite spot is to go to is a small island in the Dutch Caribbean by the name of Bonaire. Diving is kind of like stepping into another world. It's one of my favorite things to do because it kind of gives you that feeling that you're in a world surrounded by color, movement, tropical fish, and the turquoise water. It's kind of like the movie Avatar, the feeling that you get from watching it. Now think of like in the movie Avatar, all of a sudden your world is invaded and destroyed by invasive aliens. Well, that's what's happening in Bonaire. So during my presentation, I would like to explain to you what the invasive species called lionfish is doing to the ecosystem in Bonaire, and then also some of the steps that are being taken, such as lionfish hunting, to control the species. So, I guess first off is how did lionfish actually get to Bonaire to begin with? So, in the early 1990s, in South Florida, lionfish were first introduced, and they quickly spread throughout the Caribbean, through the waters in the warm tropical, all the way down to the small island of Bonaire. Now, there's a couple of different theories as far as how lionfish were first introduced. One is in 1992, Hurricane Andrew hit South Florida, and it damaged some local breeders, and the fish escaped into the waterways. The second is that unknowing pet owners actually dumped their lionfish into the waters. So that's how they were first introduced into South Florida. But now let's talk a little bit about lionfish itself. And one of the reasons they spread so quickly, lionfish have the capability of reproducing and breeding every 6 weeks. And they lay thousands of eggs each time. So one single female can lay up to 2 million eggs in 1 year. So as you can imagine, they quickly spread throughout the Caribbean as they went from island to island. The other part is they have no natural predators. Each of these fins that you see in white are actually spines that are venomous. So most fish don't want to actually eat the lionfish. And they're kind of an odd looking creature to them, so there's not a lot of interest to begin with. So ultimately, lionfish quickly started spreading through the Caribbean. Well, the other part of them is the voracious eaters. Carolyn Zico reported in San Francisco Chronicle in August of 2013, it's a dangerous beauty. Its stomach can stretch 30 times its size. It eats not only juvenile fish, but almost everything, including octopus, lobster, shrimp, amberjack, grouper, and snapper. And by doing this, actually it's killing the cleaners of the reef. And it wouldn't take long for the reef to actually die because it'd be covered with algae and ultimately would smother. And in Bonaire, that's 90% of the economy comes from the diving operations conducted on Bonaire. So it'd be devastating. Well, Bonaire knows how important their reef is. And in 1979, they actually turned Bonaire into a marine park. And it's actually controlled by a group called SNAPA, which is kind of a wing of the government there. And they saw the invasive lionfish actually spreading throughout the Caribbean, and they started taking steps by educating the dive community to be on the lookout for them in early 2008 into 2009. And in 2009, SNAPA actually posted that the first lionfish on October 26th were found by 2 Texas divers from Global Underwater Explorers, Sean Murray and Jason Wright. They spotted the juvenile lionfish on Nuco on the northwest coast of Bonaire. So lionfish are now starting to actually populate the island. So they started actually doing research for the first year, tagging, actually marking, capturing, and researching the lionfish. And they're also looking for ways to control the species. So now we know a little bit about the lionfish themselves and how they actually made it to Bonaire. So let's talk a little bit now about what Bonaire is doing to remove them. So during their studies, they actually found one person that actually done a study in the Cayman Islands to control the lionfish. A gentleman by the name of Thomas Foster noted in his conclusion, in coping with lionfish invasion, can targeted removals yield beneficial effects? And evidence that volunteers can reduce lionfish abundances across multiple sites is evidence that lionfish do not disperse rapidly to fill vacated habitat. And it suggests that the targeted removals can be effective as a management means. So now they've got a way to actually remove the lionfish. And they also came up with what's the best way to attack the lionfish without damaging the reef. And they came up with something in Florida, and they adopted it in Bon Air, and it's called an elf. And the good thing about the elf is it has a very short range, so it doesn't actually affect and hurt the reef very much. And it's the only licensed spear to be able to use in Bon Air. So now they've got all the dive industry involved also, so it became an economic boost for Bon Air. They have the dive masters being taught how to hunt the lionfish. They in turn are going out and teaching other divers. They have the local guides going out and actually training and taking people out on these dives. So it became an economic boost for the island. They also found out, what am I going to do with all these lionfish? Well, they found out they were quite tasty. So the next thing you know, they started actually advertising lionfish to eat on the menus at Bon Air, and it was being pushed by the local tourism. So now they had another income for actually the lionfish. So, in conclusion, today I introduce you to the lionfish and its effects on a small island called Bon Air, and what local divers and lionfish hunters are doing to combat the effects on the reef. So the next time you visited a small Caribbean island and you want to get something to eat, think, what's for dinner? Lionfish, the other white meat. Thank you.